Tonight, we await the results of Gabby Petito's autopsy as divers now take to the waters to search for her missing fiancé, Brian Laundrie. Do they think he's dead? Also, a mother fights for the right not to get her 14-year-old daughter the COVID vaccine. The dad took her to court over it and won. She'll join us to explain why she's fighting a case that's literally dividing a family. But first, video of Haitian migrants charging a plane that just dropped them off back home. The crisis at our border stretching way beyond that border tonight. Great to have you with us. The Donlon Report starts right now. Good evening. There are not many things we agree on in this country, but there seems to be a growing consensus on this. The situation in Del Rio, Texas, is a mess. Thousands of migrants gathered under a dusty bridge seeking asylum in the U.S. We've been told they'll all be deported, but there are now reports that thousands have been released in the U.S. with a date to report to immigration offices within 60 days. Here's an example of what's happening with some of those who are being returned to Haiti. On one of the flights, upon landing in Port-au-Prince, some of the Haitians attacked the pilots and 3 ICE officers on a different plane carrying families. Dozens of others, upset about being sent back, tried to rush back into a plane that had just landed. A security guard closed the door in time as some deportees then threw shoes at the plane, saying, "This is abuse." Migrants overtook a bus that was bound for San Antonio. They reportedly broke out and escaped, but were later recaptured. That shows how many of them feel about a country they left, a country that's dealing with a presidential assassination, a deadly earthquake, and what's described as social anarchy led by gang warlords. Add to that the pictures we talked about last night of Border Patrol agents on horseback turning away migrants trying to cross into the country. Several agents have been reassigned to desk duty while Homeland Security officials investigate. Is that fair? We'll get into that. And those images are ricocheting around the internet. It now extends beyond the agents on horseback for Democrats, as we heard in these strong words from Senator Chuck Schumer.
Right now, I'm told there are 4 flights scheduled to deport these asylum seekers back to a country that cannot receive them. Such a decision defies common sense. It also defies common decency and what America is all about.
The UN is demanding an end to mass expulsions of individuals, and the NAACP is meeting with President Biden. That group's president, Derek Johnson, called the treatment of the Haitian refugees utterly sickening. Why are some migrants being returned while others are allowed to stay? How is that determined? What is the policy? Why isn't someone from the administration in front of cameras every day explaining to the nation not just what we're seeing, but what we're doing about it and how? Is any of this, in the end, enough to get Congress to finally craft an immigration policy that has been punted for decades? Lots of questions, and that's where we start tonight with former Chief U.S. Border Patrol and also retired acting ICE Director Ronald Vitello. Ronald, thank you very much for your time, because I'm hoping you can answer at least some of those questions. You heard the open there. Do I have any of this wrong?
Well, it's good to be with you. No, we're seeing a crisis on our southwest border. Those images in Del Rio, positively sickening. It doesn't matter what side of the political spectrum that you're on. That's not an acceptable scenario for this country, the most powerful country, the most prosperous country on the planet, and we're being overrun, and the cartels are setting the agenda on the border in Ciudad Acuña and in Del Rio, Texas.
And in McAllen as well, where we're seeing reports that agents are finding migrants coming through in storm drains. How do we get this under control, Ronald?
Well, the last surge and every surge before the one in 2019 and 20 ended when we closed the loop in the loophole in immigration law. So in 2019 and 2020, the administration implemented the migrant protection protocols, which allowed people to claim asylum in the United States. But instead of being released into the country, they were forced to wait in Mexico to have their immigration hearing. In the 2014 surge under President Obama and Vice President Biden, ICE built family residential centers, detention, if you will, for people to have their immigration hearing, to have their due process, to seek relief under immigration law, but held in custody until they had those hearings. If they prevailed in those hearings and they got relief from an immigration judge, they were welcomed into the country. If not, they were removed. And so you have to put a situation together like in 2019 and 20, like in 2014, where we can close the loop so people can come, they can have their due process, but then they're removed when they don't prevail in immigration court.
But how do we do that when the numbers coming in are where they are? I mean, you're talking about 200,000 plus encounters a month.
Yeah, so they rescinded the policy of the migrant protection protocols on January 20th. If we went back to that protocol, then the word would go out. Right now, the word is out to bring or send your child to the border. Right now, the word is out that we're going soft on the border and immigration enforcement in the country. If we turn that perception around, then people will get the idea that if they come to the United States and they're not released, many fewer of them will elect to take that journey. It will deter them from trying to make that dangerous trip, to put themselves in that pipeline. Will they be preyed upon by corrupt governments and law enforcement officials, by the cartels and criminal smugglers who will trade on them to make money in this process?
The White House is addressing this. We heard from Jen Psaki today, the press secretary. Let's listen to a clip of that. We'll get your comments after.
The Trump administration approach to immigration was inhumane and was immoral. The situation at the border is the result of a broken system.
So, Ronald, I'll let you address the first part of that if you want, but I guess my question is, what is the system? I'm not sure people really know. I don't know that I know. I mean, there's a process for everyone who shows up seeking asylum, but again, I don't know how we sustain this with the numbers where they are.
Well, you have to put in place a closing of the loophole. You have to have people in custody or waiting in Mexico to have their immigration hearing. If you do that, you will deter others from taking that dangerous trip. And I will disagree with the idea that we were inhumane in instituting the Migrant Protection Protocol. That was an agreement with Mexico, an unprecedented deployment on their behalf. They put troops at their southern border to help control the Guatemala-Mexico border. They put troops in their country, checkpoints, and they put troops on the northern border to keep these large groups from amassing on our border. And so you have to have control at the border. I believe that the American people are generous. Our hearts go out to the people in the Northern Triangle and places like Haiti, where life at home is difficult, if not worse. Our heart goes out to those folks. But if we don't control our own border, how are we going to be any different?
How does this work, Ronald, when people show up and claim asylum? How do we decide who stays and who gets returned, as we're seeing with these Haitians, many of them in Del Rio?
Well, it depends on the individual situation. People will get if they make an asylum claim, that it will be adjudicated up front by an asylum officer in the field, and then eventually they'll matriculate into the immigration court system. What's happening now is many of those people are coming in, they're asking for that relief, they're being released into the country. And then many of them, what I know from experience is many of them will never follow up on that asylum claim or their immigration hearing. And so their success for them is to come to the border and be released into the country, in many cases never to be heard from again. And those who want to follow the process, it will take years and years for them to finally get in front of an immigration judge.
Is this up to Congress in the end to finally do something about this, Ronald?
Well, it's a good point. I spent a lot of time in my career as a Border Patrol agent when I led the men and women of the Border Patrol at headquarters. We worked a lot with Congress to ask for the closing of these loopholes, to reform asylum, to increase resources, to give the men and women of the Border Patrol, DHS, and ICE the tools that they need to help control that border. If you control that border, you give them those tools, we could have a lot less chaos than what we're seeing in places like Del Rio today.
Well, it's a great voice to have with us to explain a lot of these questions we have. Ronald Vitello, I know you've spent a lot of time in the immigration world. We appreciate you stopping by and joining us tonight to answer some of the questions.
Good to be with you.
All right, let's move on because we do have another guest on this, former Chief U.S. Border Patrol we just mentioned there, and also the former Director of ICE joining us. But we do now want to join with a congressional candidate, a Democrat from Florida. Her name is Sheila Sherfilis McCormick. And her parents actually immigrated to the U.S. from Haiti. So I know that a lot of people in your district are upset about what you're seeing. Let me ask you first, just for your response about what you're seeing in Del Rio and what you're seeing in Port-au-Prince as well.
It's heartbreaking, as we're seeing after an assassination and then an earthquake, and then you have asylum seekers who are coming to the border and being treated terribly. We see pictures of people with babies trying to cross the border. We see agents with whips grabbing people. It's inhumane what we're seeing.
So what do you think needs to be done?
We're just asking for the Biden administration to apply the law, allow them to have a chance in seeking asylum, allow them to have a hearing. This expulsion is ridiculous. This expulsion, especially in these circumstances and the way they're being treated, it is definitely heartbreaking. And this is not the promise that the Haitian people believed in, Haitian Americans, when we voted for the Biden administration. We wanted a fair chance. All we're doing is asking for the law to be applied to us equitably and not for us to be put on a plane and sent away. Title 42 shouldn't be applicable right now in this moment. We have vaccines, we have tests available. It's just unconscionable that everything that Haitian people have gone through, that they're being put on planes and sent away. Some of these Haitians they haven't lived in Haiti in the last 10 years, but they're sending them all back to Haiti. Today we had 6 flights with 135 people on those flights who were denied a hearing.
So I'm curious about the timing on all of this. Sheila, how is it that 10,000, 15,000 people who have ties to Haiti all ended up at the same place on the southern border in Del Rio, far away from their homeland?
Well, we knew it was coming. With the assassination of the president, the country went through so much instability at that time. And then compounding that with an earthquake that they couldn't recover from. There's no way you can actually exist in Haiti right now or survive, especially with all the threats of the gangs taking over certain streets.
Many of them were in South and Central America at the time. They hadn't been, to your point, in Haiti for 10 years.
Yes, there's a few of them who have been away from the country for years, but there's a good number who did come from Haiti. And what we're asking is that they get a fair chance. And there's been a lot of turbulence going on in the other countries where we see discrimination, where Haitians aren't being treated fairly, even in South America. So them coming to the United States, seeking the beacon of hopes and all the promises that the United States has made to other countries, why deny it to us? Why deny it to Haitian people? Why is it the home of the free, except for if you're Haitian? We have to confront that evil past that we've had with the Haitian community and Haitian people.
What have you learned about why some are being returned to Haiti and others are being allowed to stay in the U.S.?
Well, there's no clear reason why I know some are getting processed and they're getting a hearing, but a good number, they're just packing on planes and sending them away. And that's what we're asking for it to end. Why is it that the selection process isn't fair? There's no random or no real reason for selecting them. And it seems like they're trying to make it a quiet problem to ship it away when we have to open up our doors. We saw that more than 96,000 Afghans are promised to come in. Why is that not equitable for the Haitian community? Why do Haitians need to be turned around? Why are Haitians being beaten? Why are we being yelled at? Why is this treatment acceptable to Haitian people?
Well, the Afghan situation is different. I think we've all seen that there were promises made to them who helped us in the war. They do have special immigration visas. Some in this group down in Del Rio, I guess, don't. But I guess that leads to the question, why is there so much uncertainty around the policy, do you think, right now?
I think at the root of it, it's always been discrimination. We saw before when they had a mass exodus with Cuban Americans and Haitians, there were rules that were applied inequitably. And at this point, everyone's standing and we're saying that we want equal rights for Black migrants, especially Haitians. There's never been any clear rule of why this is happening. And right now, the U.S. has to stand up. The Biden administration has to stand up for all the Haitian Americans who voted for the president to make his promises to us true, that he will treat us equally and allow us to have a chance at asylum. That is all we're asking for. Give us a hearing, declare a national emergency, allow for there to be military there to protect the people who are there, allow for them to have their hearing, allow them to have a chance to articulate that they do have a credible fear. Give them a humanitarian parole. Do something for us because it's only fair.
Democratic congressional candidate from Florida, Sheila Sherfalis McCormick. Thank you, Sheila, so much for your time. We appreciate you joining us.
Thank you.
The search for Gabby Petito's fiance, Brian Laundrie, continues. Divers are now looking underwater. What might they find below the surface? Plus, one mother's fight to keep her teenage daughter unvaccinated, but the dad says she has to get the shot and got the backing from a judge. That mother joins us coming up. And don't forget, you can join us on social media as well, at the Donlon Report on Twitter. The search for the fiance of Gabby Petito, Brian Laundrie, continues in Carlton Reserve, Florida. Petito's death has been ruled a homicide. Laundrie listed as a person of interest. Joining me now live from the Carlton Reserve, News Nation's Brian Enton with the latest on the search. Brian?
Yeah, Joe, another long day out here at the massive Carlton Reserve. It's basically a swamp. The police just gave us an update. They're pretty much done for today. You can see the sun's going down out here. It's just such a wooded area. Where we're standing, it's dry, but most of this reserve, 75% of it is underwater. Like I said, just a massive swamp. And take a look at this. For the first time today, we saw dive crews brought in. You had boats and you had divers brought in to go into some of these deep areas, lakes and the areas of the swamp that are very, very deep. We asked police about that. Is there a reason they are searching the lakes? They say this is routine. They don't want to leave a stone unturned, but it is possible that they got some kind of tip that is leading them to the lakes, Joe. Again, today, nothing turned up. They say they will be back here tomorrow with a full operation again. All of the crews will be back. Many people wondering, is there something they know? Why do they keep coming back to the reserve? Another full day of searching tomorrow, Joe.
Well, it's dangerous, we know. Brian, as you pointed out, there are lots of alligators and snakes as well in those waters. What can you tell us, Brian, about the full autopsy on Gabby and when those results are expected?
Well, we're still waiting. I called the coroner today in Wyoming. We've been in touch with him every single day. He was very open with us in the beginning, but now the FBI has basically put a lockdown on this entire investigation. He said, look, I can't release any more information. It's going to be up to the FBI when they decide to release the autopsy report. We've reached out to the FBI, but there's really no timeline on that right now.
All right, Brian Enton, thank you for the update tonight in Florida. From disappearance to manhunt, what happened to Gabby Petito? We have a special in-depth look at the case. Tune in tomorrow. It's a special 1-hour report at 9 Eastern, 8 Central, right here on News Nation. We're going to turn now for more on this to Stuart Kaplan, retired FBI agent, to get some more answers on the ongoing search for Brian Laundrie. Let's start, if we can, Stuart, with this autopsy and the process, where we are in this, what investigators will ultimately learn from these final results.
Well, the autopsy has several components. We still don't know what the cause of death was. We know that it was potentially ruled or probably ruled as a homicide, but we still don't know how this person unfortunately met their demise. We also don't know the time of death. That would be very, very critical and very important for the progress of this investigation, given the fact that we do know there is one text message, or the last text message, that purportedly was sent by Gabby, or from her phone on August 27th. Mm-hmm. So we'd like to know if we can pinpoint her time of death. And then there is the pathology and the toxicology report to see if, in fact, she had ingested anything with respect to narcotics, illegal drugs, etc. So those are some of the things that I think we want to know, and once we learn about those, there'll be additional pieces of the puzzle for the FBI to start to get a better understanding of what happened to her.
Do we know if agents are looking elsewhere? I'm guessing this isn't something they would let us know to tip off what they're searching for, but what do you make of the fact that they're sending in divers now? Does that lead you to believe that maybe they think he's dead in there?
I wouldn't draw a conclusion with respect to Brian Laundrie being found in that lake. What I think is it's a obvious place for someone who may have some motive to discard something of evidentiary value that they thought at the time to discard in that lake, that it would be nearly impossible for it to resurface or to recover, absent obviously sending in now the specialized divers to try to retrieve, if it's a computer, a phone, right, some clothing. So that would be the reason why we would want to exhaust that search of those lakes.
Stuart, profile this guy for us. What kind of person disappears after something like this?
Well, you know, obviously you would draw the conclusion that there's some consciousness of guilt. But I will tell you, in my experience in conducting some of these type of investigations, quite frankly, there are some times where something does happen that's more accidental than intentional, and people panic And we expect that even though something accidental may have occurred, people will notify the authorities or notify the loved ones, and it will be easily explainable. This is a situation that if, in fact, the autopsy comes back definitively that it was blunt trauma to Gabby or strangulation or asphyxiation or something, then obviously we know that we can rule out some sort of accidental death. And then we have to then suggest that the reason why he ran or he's in hiding is because he understands that he's going to be implicated in being the responsible party for her death.
How do you determine if someone's left the country, Stuart? I mean, I'm guessing in cases like this, ultimately, in order for them to resolve, you need a break.
Well, look, I can tell you that you have the premier law enforcement agency, the FBI, not only in the United States, but anywhere in the world, working as now the lead investigating agency. And I can tell you that they are watching the borders. I'm not going to give up sources and methods, but I can tell you right now that it would be nearly impossible if Brian Laundrie was to use conventional modes of transportation, that he would be more likely than not be picked up at a border crossing. Now, with saying that, there are other means of getting across a border into another country with being undetected, but it would take the assistance of others.
You're saying even before like
that.
last week, Stuart, when he was just, I guess, a person of interest and wasn't talking to police?
Again, without giving up, because I don't want to prejudice some of the information that I know, I will tell you that there are certain safe stops that were put in and that are routinely implemented, even when we're looking at a person of interest. You know, look, we've heard some criticism with respect to why he wasn't kept in pocket under 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week surveillance. That, I think, was more of a resource issue with local law enforcement. They just didn't have the manpower. But on the other side of that, there are methods that are implemented to ensure someone is not going to leave the country.
Stuart Kaplan, retired FBI agent, thanks for stopping by. We appreciate your time and insight.
My pleasure.
28 trillion and counting. That's the national debt right now. We each owe $86,000 of that. And 1 month and counting, that's when the U.S. could default on its debt without action from Congress next week. And battles in Congress, a border mess, inflation worries, and an agenda on the ropes. Lots facing the president, and that's just from Democrats. More on that coming up. We have a bill for you to pay tonight. How about $86,027? That's how much each of us owe. Each of your family members owes. Every American owes on the federal national debt. Now get this, a family of four has a bill of more than $344,000. The feds will accept cash or check, if you're curious. That's because as of this afternoon, at least, the total federal debt was $28,427,300,000,000. Anyway, you see the numbers there. And if you're counting 14 digits, more than $28 trillion. And that number's actually gone up just since I started reading it. But the country is running up against a debt limit. It's sort of like your credit card limit, meaning it's all we can borrow as a country for now, unless Congress approves more. Democrats have plans to spend trillions. Republicans say it's too much. Republican Senate Leader Mitch McConnell says to spend trillions more on top of trillions in COVID relief. Well, the Democrats will need to raise the debt limit themselves.
My advice to this Democratic government, the President, the House, and the Senate, don't play Russian roulette with our economy. Step up and raise the debt ceiling to cover all that you've been engaged in all year long.
Grover Norquist, president of Americans for Tax Reform, joins us now. So, Grover, we asked this question a lot on the broadcast. Where does this end?
Well, the Democrats, as the Republican leader said, have the votes to simply increase the debt ceiling themselves. They don't need a single Republican vote to do it. They have the majority in the House. They have the majority in the Senate. They don't want to do this and acknowledge the trillions in additional debt they're putting on without trying to get the Republican fingerprints on it. The Republicans are saying, we didn't vote for this stuff. We're not going to vote for all of this wild spending. If you want to raise the debt ceiling to cover your spending, go ahead and do so. So right now they're both posturing. The Democrats know there's no threat to shut down the government or to, collapse our ability to lend money, borrow money, because the Democrats tomorrow morning could pass it through the House, the Senate, and the president could sign it, and all this would go on. We do need to move forward and decide, do we really want to spend another $3.5 trillion, which is $3.5 to $5 trillion, which is what the Democrats are talking about doing, on top of all the present spending.
So if only it were this easy, Grover, for us personally to just raise our debt limit, right? I mean, that's not how it works. We all have to live by a budget. Why can't the government?
Well, the government puts a debt ceiling on to try and be some sort of, to slow down some of the too much debt. The only time we've ever had real reform in government spending, like the Graham-Rudman spending limitation or the sequester that happened in 2012, was when there was a debt ceiling, and the Republicans and Democrats got together, and the Democrats wanted more money, and the Republicans said, only if you get some spending restraint. And so we saved $1 to $2 trillion as a result of the deal with Obama. The president wanted to spend more. The Republicans said no debt ceiling unless you rein in some of that spending.
This isn't new. I don't need to tell you that. And it's not exclusive to one party. Each of the past four administrations has added to the debt. In the end, Grover, when do we start paying this down, and who pays for it?
Well, we're all going to pay for it, perhaps in inflation. We're going to pay for it in higher taxes in the future. What we need to do is start bending the cost curve down, slow the growth of spending to start with. And then the other part is a more pro-growth policy. More growth in the economy brings in more revenue. Every time we had the unemployment down to 3.5%, we were doing quite well in terms of creating real jobs and getting more money into the government through taxing, not higher taxes, but taxing more workers. Right. We need to get back to more workers, not more taxes.
So I'm sure you have your fine-tooth comb out. In fact, I've seen some of the things that you're taking issue with. Give us an item that caught your eye in this spending plan. What are we paying for?
Oh, dear. $3.5 trillion for a civilian climate corps. This is going to be a bunch of young people who go around as hall monitors and knock on your door and tell you that you should turn your thermostat down during the winter and wear a sweater instead of heating your house adequately. They may have uniforms. They're talking about uniforms. They'll all be unionized and pay union dues so that the unions can make contributions to politicians, perhaps the ones who voted for the bill. One of the worst ones, though, is they're going to give a $1.3 trillion in grants, subsidies, to newspapers. If you have less than 750 employees, that's not a small newspaper, you'll get $1,200 per worker subsidy. So can these people now even write about national politics without talking about the conflict of interest every one of them would have?
Well, newspapers need help, Grover.
They should get their help by selling more newspapers, writing better stuff, not by getting money from taxpayers.
What about e-bikes?
Which ones?
E-bikes. Isn't there an incentive for that?
Electric bikes. Yes, yes. I'm sorry. There's another subsidy for electric bicycles up to $8,000, not for poor people, mind you, for people who can afford an $8,000 electric bicycle. So you don't have to get any exercise at all, but it's electric bicycle. $1,500 subsidy from taxpayers only if the company that makes that electric bicycle is unionized and forces everybody to pay dues, which then go back into political contributions to the people who pass this kind of legislation. The massive subsidy to targeted businesses, unionized businesses.
Grover, let's get your take quickly on progressives on the Democratic side stripping the Iron Dome funding in the House. It was $1 billion in that defense system for Israel against the will of many in their own party. What's going on there?
Well, you have a division in the Democratic Party about support for Israel. It used to be more supportive, but there are a lot of progressives out there that don't like Israel very much. And this is a self-defense weapon we're talking about here. But it's not your father's or your grandfather's Democratic Party. It's a completely new collection of people in the D Party.
It's the old guard versus the new guard. Grover Norquist, president of Americans for Tax Reform. It's good to see you. Thank you.
Good to be with you.
Let's head to the halls of Congress now for more on the horse trading, if you will, with Julia Manchester, our friend, national political reporter for The Hill. So, Julia, right now it looks like a pitched political battle with two sides kind of staring each other down, but both sides are Democrats.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of internal fighting right now, Joe, between Democrats. You have progressives really wanting to stick with this $3.5 trillion bill and willing to hold up that bipartisan infrastructure package because they say they want to keep the family infrastructure package. Now, in this $3.5 trillion bill, you have a number of social programs. You have a number of programs that are aimed at climate change, paid family leave, that kind of a thing. However, you have moderate Democrats such as Joe Manchin in the Senate, who are vowing to really oppose that $3.5 trillion bill, saying it's too much. And you're seeing Republicans really start to take advantage of Democrats really in disarray. So this is a tough day for Democrats in Washington.
How much of this is just jockeying, Julia? I mean, in the end, the debt ceiling will get raised, I'm guessing, right? And in the end, perhaps, I don't know. What do you think happens with these two bills, the infrastructure bill and the spending bill? There's a lot at stake here for Democrats and the president's agenda. The clock's ticking.
Absolutely. And this is at a time, Joe, when you've seen that the president's approval rating is starting to tick down, according to a number of polls released this week. And you're also seeing the president face backlash for maybe growing inflation in the United States, as well as his foreign policy situation in Afghanistan, for example. So this is a week, really, where you want to see Democrats come together and be united. But we're simply not seeing that at this point. Instead, you're seeing progressives really hold on to their principles, hold on to, vowing to fight climate change, wanting to really include all of that extra spending in that $3.5 trillion bill. But then you have the more moderates who are probably more politically aligned with Joe Biden, really saying this needs to be a piecemeal approach, and they won't commit to $3.5 trillion. Do
you get the impression that throughout the sausage-making process here, in the end, it all works out among Democrats?
I think your guess is as good as mine. It's hard to say right now. I would assume that the Biden administration is hoping that this infrastructure bill is passed. I mean, we saw earlier this summer, there was a lot of celebration that the Biden administration and congressional Democrats were able to do this in a bipartisan fashion. That's something Joe Biden has really touted throughout his campaign and presidency, that he's able to reach across the aisle. The problem is he has intra-party divisions holding him back. And I think this shows the growing influence that the progressive wing of the party has within the Democratic Party, and really in their growing numbers, stopping a lot of these legislative measures from going through.
What do you make, Julia, while we have you, these House progressives basically publicly bucking the old guard centrists and stripping that Iron Dome funding that we talked about for Israel? They're certainly flexing their muscles here.
I don't think that's really any surprise at this point. Look, the division in the Democratic Party over the issue of Israel has been bubbling for years. And I think over the past year, with the Black Lives Matter movement and, raised voices on social justice in this country, you're seeing a lot of progressives start to take action. And that action for them, for progressives like Rashida Tlaib or Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, involves really targeting Israel and wanting to strip that funding because they don't view Israel in a positive light, the same light that a lot of Democrats view it as. So I think this is definitely a sign of a division within the party on Israel that's probably only going to get bigger.
And one of many things we'll be watching in D.C. over the next days and weeks. Julia Manchester from our partners at The Hill. It's good to see you as always. Thank you.
Good to see you too.
I'm announcing another historic commitment. The United States is buying another 500 million doses of Pfizer to donate to low and middle income countries around the world.
A bold promise today from President Biden, who announced the U.S. will donate another 500 million vaccines globally. Here at home, one family divided over vaccinating their teenager. The mom says no, dad says yes, and got the law involved. Is that fair? The verdict coming up. We have some breaking news off the top here. The FDA has approved Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine for people 65 and older, those at high risk and those at risk due to job-related exposure. We're talking about the booster now. Pfizer also announced this week that its coronavirus vaccine is safe and effective in low doses in children ages 5 to 11. But a question looms. Will the hesitancy we've seen in adults carry over to their kids? Uptake among older children has lagged, and polling indicates reservations among a significant number of parents. And the ongoing debate has pitted family members in some cases against each other across the U.S., including the family of Melissa Fallon. She and her husband have decided not to vaccinate their children, but Melissa's ex and the father of her oldest daughter, Aubrey, says he wants her to get the shot. That case has now gone before the judge, and the judge sided with Aubrey's dad. Mother Melissa Fallon joins us now. Melissa, thanks for the time. This is an interesting story that we've all been talking about this afternoon. You have 50-50 custody, which means, I guess, in general, that you have an equal say in what happens with your daughter. What did the judge say about her decision and siding with your ex?
Well, before the court date, she let me know that she was pro-vaccine. So I really felt like I didn't have a fighting chance. We went to court and I had a doctor's note, and the doctor's note did state that the American Pediatric Association does recommend children 12 and older to get the vaccine. Right. But he did note that he wanted Aubrey's opinion to be taken into consideration, and Aubrey does not want the shot. She'll be 14 in October. And the judge kind of just, I feel like pushed that aside and made her judgment.
Why doesn't your daughter want the shot, Melissa?
I think a number of reasons. For one, I had cancer at a very young age, 30 years old, and my girls are extremely high risk. So we don't know what the side effects in the future come from the shot, and she knows quite a few friends that have had COVID that have been just fine and built up their own immunities, and it's her choice ultimately, and I feel like she should have a say, and her choice should be heard.
Is that why you haven't gotten the vaccine, because of your cancer?
No, I haven't got the vaccine because I have faith in my own body's immunities, and I don't agree with the shot.
So if this were a custody decision, Melissa, in court, you have to live by the judge's decision, right? I mean, how is this different?
Well, I have 30 days to appeal this. So I've been calling all around for lawyers, but because I do live in California and most of the lawyers are pro-vaccine, nobody will take my case. So I've been having an extremely hard time finding someone to help me just even appeal this.
All right, let's listen to one of the nation's top pediatricians. She actually testified before a House committee hearing and talked about the vaccine. We'll get your comment after.
Okay.
We do believe that these vaccines are safe, that the process to bring them to approval, even under emergency use authorization, is a very rigorous process. Nobody wants to put a child at risk. So we believe in the safety of these vaccines for all children when they're ready.
When they're ready, Melissa, what does that mean to you? And does that ease your concern at all for your daughter?
No, not at all. When they're ready, does that mean that they get to choose when they're ready? Or, again, is it us parents getting to decide for them? The FDA has approved many things before and had to recall them, whether we ingest them or have them injected. And I'm just not comfortable putting something in her body that we can never take back.
If this decision stands, will you get her vaccinated?
No, I won't be the one taking her. If it does stand, I will fight my hardest. I'm still looking for a lawyer, and if it comes down to it, then her father, my ex, will be the one taking her. I will not take her. She doesn't want it.
Melissa Fallon, thank you for your time. We appreciate you joining us and talking about the case.
Thank you, guys.
We want to bring in now, attorney Wendy Patrick. Wendy, this is certainly an unusual case, and it's interesting on a number of levels. Where do you come down on it?
I'll tell you, it's interesting on a number of levels because of its novelty. I mean, we've never been talking about this before. There isn't the type of COVID pandemic precedent that we wish we had to look at for guidance. So what you're talking about here, we're not talking about what we usually talk about: no shot, no salary, no shot, no syllabus, vaccinations in employment settings and educational settings. We're just talking about a mandatory vaccination. That is very different. That's new territory in a sense. There have been a few decisions that have come down around the country that have tried to mandate different people taking the vaccine. Bail is one of them, where you have a judge saying, all right, if I'm going to let somebody out on bail, they have to be vaccinated. Or occasionally child custody, but that's for a parent. But some of those have been reversed, so there isn't solid precedent of the sort that we'd like to have to figure out how this is going to shake out.
Yeah.
And it breaks my heart that you have a young lady that doesn't want the vaccine. So, and it is true that judges do want to take into account the wishes of everyone involved, including the child.
Yeah, this is an interesting case because I think a lot of people can see both sides of it. But what if you had a married couple, Wendy? How would that be different?
Well, I don't know that it would be different. You have a father and you have a mother, and sure, they have shared custody, but when you have one saying one thing, wishing one thing, and one another, and then the child having the same wishes as the mother, you know, it's a case of first impression in the COVID era. Now, we can analogize it to other decisions that courts have to make, where you have one parent wanting something and the other something else. But when it comes to vaccinations, courts really want to have everything be very narrowly tailored. They are looking, at least some of the arguments, the COVID vaccine for kids might be closer to the flu than to smallpox. Everybody is citing that case from 1905, which does have precedential value, but can be really distinguished over the years by what population we're talking about and who's ordering it. It's not a local municipality. In this case, it's a judge. So there is so much for lawyers to work with, and I'm confident that they will.
Yeah, it is interesting, too, because I guess in most cases, to your point, you're talking about custody, how much time one gets, property, things like that. But this is, it's a health issue. It's a vaccination that I guess parents normally would make the decision on.
That's true. And in the era of the Delta variant, younger, sicker, quicker, this is an argument that has gained steam over the last several months, is to what extent do parents have the right to make these types of decisions? Now, I know that there's lots we could talk about politically. Well, why aren't we forcing, you know, people coming across the border to get vaccinated? I mean, there's lots of political arguments we could make, but keeping it in the context of the family, that's significant. And that is an area where a judge really does have to weigh all the equities you pointed out, the values of the mother versus the father, and the young lady involved as well.
It's a tough case. Wendy, Patrick, thanks for coming on and talking with us about it. We appreciate it. Correcting America's past, the U.S. continues to topple symbols of the Confederacy. Ahead, our American Snapshot, how the nation is reckoning with a racist history. Statues commemorating Civil War generals are being taken down across the country. In their place, new statues commemorating the abolition of slavery. The newest unveiled today in Richmond, Virginia. The Emancipation and Freedom statue showing a man and woman holding a baby after being freed from slavery. That is our American Snapshot tonight. Leland's next with On Balance.